They buried entire cities with these bricks, not concrete. Not steel, not modern fireproof panels engineered in billion-dollar laboratories. Sand, potato starch, and a method so strange, historians still argue over why it disappeared. In 1347, while Europe was collapsing into plague, famine, and fire, whispers began spreading through parts of Eastern Europe and the Middle East about builders creating walls that wouldn't burn the way ordinary structures did. Villages caught in massive fires were reduced to ash, except for a few surviving ovens, storage rooms, and strange pale blocks that looked almost primitive. No kiln, no giant furnaces, no industrial heat, just sand, starch, pressure, time, and the strangest part? Modern material scientists are quietly rediscovering that this ancient idea may have been far ahead of its time, because what most people don't realize is the future of safer homes may not come from futuristic factories. It may come from forgotten survival knowledge hidden for centuries. And once you see how these bricks work, you'll never look at modern construction the same way again. The world taught us that stronger always means more complicated, more chemicals, more machinery, more energy. But history tells a very different story. Some of humanity's most resilient materials came from people with almost nothing. No electricity, no corporations, no industrial supply chains, just observation and desperation. Because fire used to terrify civilizations in ways modern people barely understand. One spark could erase generations. Entire medieval towns were built from wood packed tightly together. When one building caught fire, the whole city became fuel. Families watched everything vanish in hours. Homes, food, memories, futures. So survival depended on one thing, finding materials that fire couldn't easily consume. And somewhere along that brutal timeline, builders discovered something bizarre. Sand alone doesn't burn. Starch alone absolutely does. But under specific conditions, mixing them together creates a hardened mineral-like structure that behaves completely differently than either material alone. Almost like nature creating a primitive composite material centuries before modern science had words for it. Now here's where the story becomes strange. In recent years, researchers experimenting with biodegradable building materials found that starch molecules can actually bind granular particles together at a microscopic level. When dried properly, the structure becomes shockingly rigid. Add compressed sand, and you create a dense thermal barrier that resists rapid combustion. Not perfectly fireproof forever, nothing truly is, but dramatically resistant to flame spread and heat transfer. And unlike modern concrete production, which releases enormous amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, these ancient-style mixtures require almost no industrial energy. That changes everything, because the average person has no idea how destructive modern cement production really is. Some environmental estimates suggest cement manufacturing contributes roughly 8% of global CO2 emissions. Think about that. One material, one industry, nearly rivaling entire nations. And yet, for centuries, humans experimented with alternatives most people have never even heard of, including starch-based binders. But the real secret wasn't just the ingredients, it was the process. Picture a cold medieval workshop lit by oil lamps. A builder pours fine sand into a carved wooden trough. Potato starch, rare and valuable in some regions, is boiled slowly into a thick paste. The mixture is folded together again and again until it becomes dense like clay, but strangely elastic under pressure. Then comes compression. Not gentle shaping, extreme force, packed into molds so tightly that air pockets nearly disappear. Because air is what helps fire travel. And this is where ancient intuition becomes modern science. Today, engineers understand that dense materials with low oxygen pockets slow combustion dramatically. Heat struggles to penetrate evenly, flames lose momentum, structural integrity lasts longer. Those old builders may not have understood molecular chemistry, but they understood survival. And survival creates innovation faster than comfort ever will. What happened next is even more fascinating. When modern experimenters recreated similar starch sand blocks, some discovered the material hardened further over time as moisture evaporated and mineral bonds tightened. Certain mixtures even became surprisingly water-resistant after curing. Not because of magic, because starch behaves differently when heated, cooled, compressed, and dried over long periods. In simple terms, the molecules reorganize, the material transforms, and suddenly something soft becomes stone-like. That sounds impossible until you realize nature does this constantly. Trees turn sunlight into wood, stronger than steel relative to its weight. Seashells create impact-resistant armor from minerals dissolved in water. Spider silk outperforms industrial fibers humans spent billions trying to imitate. Nature has always been the greatest engineer. Humanity just forgot how to listen, and maybe that's why this story hits something deeper emotionally. Because beneath the science, this isn't really about bricks, it's about dependence. Modern society convinced millions of people that survival only comes from giant systems. Massive factories, expensive technologies, endless consumption. But ancient builders understood something terrifyingly simple. Real resilience comes from understanding materials around you, the earth beneath your feet, the chemistry hidden inside food, the physics hiding inside pressure and heat. Knowledge used to belong to ordinary people. Now most people can barely explain how their own homes are built. And this disconnect is becoming dangerous. Wildfires are growing more extreme across parts of America every year. Entire neighborhoods disappear in hours. Families flee walls that ignite like paper. Synthetic materials release toxic smoke. Roofs collapse faster than expected. Meanwhile, researchers are scrambling to develop sustainable fire-resistant alternatives because modern construction is facing a crisis few want to admit publicly. The old systems are becoming fragile, too expensive, too energy-intensive, too environmentally destructive. Which brings us back to sand and starch. Simple doesn't mean weak. In fact, simplicity is often what survives longest. But there's another layer to this story almost nobody talks about: health. Because traditional industrial materials can release volatile compounds, microdust particles, chemical residues, and airborne toxins during production, installation, or fires. After major house fires, the smoke itself often becomes deadlier than the flames. Now compare that to naturally derived mineral and starch composites. Fewer synthetic additives, fewer industrial chemicals, less toxic combustion. Suddenly, this ancient technique stops sounding primitive and starts sounding strangely futuristic, especially as scientists explore biodegradable insulation, natural binders, mushroom-based construction panels, and carbon-neutral housing systems. The future of healthy homes may actually look more ancient than modern. That realization unsettles people, because it forces a difficult question: what else did humanity abandon too early? What other knowledge disappeared simply because industrialization made us obsessed with speed instead of resilience? And this is where the story becomes emotional. Imagine a father in the 1300s rebuilding after a village fire. No insurance, no government aid, no emergency funds waiting to save him, only ash, fear, and children depending on him. So he experiments again and again, trying mixtures, testing walls near heat, learning from failure because failure meant death. That's how forgotten breakthroughs are born, not in luxury, in necessity. And maybe that's why these ideas still resonate today, because deep down, people are exhausted by systems that feel artificial, fragile, and disconnected from nature. They want things that feel real again. Food with recognizable ingredients, homes built to last, materials that don't poison the environment around them. And strangely enough, ancient building science is beginning to offer clues. Now, to be clear, nobody's saying potato starch bricks will replace skyscrapers tomorrow. Modern engineering still matters enormously. Structural safety matters. Regulations matter. But experimental eco-builders today are already exploring compressed earth blocks, starch composites, natural insulation systems, and low-energy materials inspired by ancient methods. Why? Because the evidence keeps pointing toward one uncomfortable truth. The industrial world may have overcomplicated things. Sometimes the strongest ideas are the ones closest to nature. And perhaps the most powerful part of this entire story is realizing that innovation doesn't always move forward in a straight line. Sometimes humanity advances by rediscovering what it forgot. A lost technique, a buried experiment, a forgotten survival method hidden beneath centuries of noise. And somewhere between sand grains and starch molecules, between medieval desperation and modern science, there's a lesson bigger than construction itself. Civilizations survive when ordinary people understand the world around them, not just consume it blindly, because knowledge is resilience, always has been. So the next time someone tells you ancient people were primitive, remember this: they built cathedrals without computers, tracked stars without satellites, created materials that still confuse researchers centuries later, and maybe, just maybe, they understood something modern society is only beginning to relearn: that the smartest solutions are often hidden inside the simplest things imaginable: sand, potatoes, pressure, time. If this story opened your eyes, then you're exactly the kind of person keeping forgotten knowledge alive. And there are many more hidden ideas history tried to bury, waiting to be uncovered by people willing to question what the modern world calls impossible.